I grew up in a town that people don't talk about unless they have to. Not because anything big happened there. No famous serial killers, no historic disasters. Just a small place cradled by dense woods, stitched together with old roads that don't lead anywhere important. It's the kind of town where it's always a little gray, even in summer. Where people don't leave their porches much once the sun dips. Where you hear rumors like, "Don't fish at the lake after dark." Or, "If you hear knocking at your back door late at night, don't answer." Not because people really believe, but because it's tradition. Like handing down old recipes. You don't question it. One of the things we really didn't talk about, though, was the railroad. The old rail line cut straight through the woods north of town. It hadn't been active in decades, not since before my dad was a kid. The tracks were warped and rusted, hidden under leaves, but you could still follow them if you wanted. Nobody really did, though. Even the hunters avoided it. They were stories, of course. You'd hear them at sleepovers, whispered over flashlights and junk food, about kids who went walking down the tracks and didn't come back. About seeing old lantern lights bobbing in the woods where the trains used to run. About how, some nights, if you stood real still, you could hear the train passing by, even though there was nothing there. It was all the kind of stuff you laugh off, until it's not. When it started, it was nothing dramatic. I was home from college for the summer, staying with my folks. I was restless, that heavy kind of bored you get when you outgrow your hometown but don't quite belong anywhere else yet. My friends had either moved away or gotten stuck in town jobs they hated. One humid evening in early June, I decided to take a walk. Clear my head, you know. The sun was sinking low, leaking out between the trees. The air buzzed with the sound of cicadas, thick and humming. I pulled my hoodie tighter around me, not because I was cold, but because the feel of the night was starting to creep under my skin. I didn't have a real plan, but my feet carried me north, toward the woods, toward the tracks. It wasn't conscious, exactly, more like a tugging. The path into the trees was just a worn strip of earth between the pines, the smell of sap and damp leaves sharp in the air. As I walked, the sound of the town fell away behind me, the occasional car, the barking dogs, until it was just the crunch of my sneakers and the cicadas. And eventually, even they seemed to grow quiet. That was the first thing that should have made me turn around, but it didn't. I found the tracks after about 15 minutes. They looked worse than I remembered. Warped and sunken, like the earth was trying to swallow them. Iron rails half buried in mud and moss. Old splintered ties poking up like ribs from a shallow grave. Standing there, I felt this weird sensation, like the woods around me were holding their breath, waiting. I don't know why I stepped onto the tracks. I didn't mean to. It just sort of happened. The moment my foot touched the rail, a jolt of cold shot up my leg, like stepping into a deep freezer. I staggered back, heart hammering. The wood stayed silent, watching. I almost laughed it off, chalked it up to nerves, but then I heard it. A faint sound. Click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. My blood ran cold. It was rhythmic, faint, but getting louder. I spun around, scanning the trees, expecting to see someone messing with me, but the woods were empty. The sound kept growing, click, clack, like the slow, steady approach of something heavy dragging itself closer. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and started walking fast back the way I came, trying not to break into a run. Every horror story I'd ever heard screamed in my head not to look back. The air felt thicker now, clinging to my skin. The scent of iron filled my nose, sharp and metallic, like blood. Clack, 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 still getting closer. I made it back to the edge of the woods in what felt like hours, lungs burning. The moment my sneakers hit the cracked asphalt of the old service road, the sound stopped. Just gone. The cicadas picked up again, loud and alive. I kept walking, not daring to look over my shoulder, until I was back under the glow of the streetlights, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs might crack. When I finally did glance back, the woods stood quiet and still, bathed in dusk. No sign of anything. No reason for the sound. No reason at all. But that night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I swore I could still hear it. Faint, impatient, waiting for me. Click, clack, click, click, clack. I didn't tell anyone about it at first. Maybe it was embarrassment. Maybe it was fear that saying it out loud would make it real. I spent the next few days trying to write it off. Stress, imagination, a trick of sound in the woods. I even convinced myself I'd heard a deer moving through the underbrush. Anything was better than admitting I'd genuinely been scared. Like, really scared. For the first time in a long time. But that sound, it lingered. It followed me into sleep. Every night, as I drifted off, I'd hear it faintly, somewhere just beyond the reach of consciousness. Click, clack, click, clack. Like something was pacing outside the house, slow and steady, never urgent, just patient. A few days later, my friend Nathan came over. Nathan and I had grown up together, the kind of friends you don't have to explain things to. He was one of the few people who hadn't moved away. He worked at his dad's auto shop and spent most of his free time hunting or fishing. Salt of the earth kind of guy. We were sitting on the back porch, nursing cheap beers and watching the fireflies blink in the heavy summer dark, when he brought it up. "Have you been out by the woods lately?" he asked in that casual, throwaway tone people use when they're testing the waters. My mouth went dry. I took a long sip before answering. "Yeah." "Why?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Picked at the label on his bottle. "Nest. Weird stuff lately. Couple folks heard things." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Nathan glanced at me, then leaned in a little closer, voice low. "Old man Derry says he heard the train again." I felt a chill start deep in my spine. "Bahi. He says it passed by his deer stand around midnight, full lights, whistle and all." Nathan shook his head slowly. "Only thing is, there ain't no rails out that way anymore. Torn up years ago." We sat in silence after that. The fireflies blinked lazily around us. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then went quiet. Finally, Nathan said, "We could go look if you want." Part of me wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed it. But another part, the reckless, restless part that had led me to the tracks in the first place, spoke up before I could stop it. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." We packed flashlights and a couple more beers and took Nathan's truck up the old service road. The woods seemed even darker this time. The trees crowded closer, their branches clawing at the edges of the headlights. The road was more pothole than pavement. We parked where the pavement crumbled into dirt. For a long moment, neither of us moved, just sat there, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, the night thick around us. Then Nathan killed the headlights, plunging us into darkness. The woods immediately felt alive with movement. Tiny sounds, branches creaking, leaves rustling, all layered over each other into a symphony of quiet unease. We quickly turned our flashlights and started walking. The beams of light seemed weak, swallowed almost immediately by the night. I kept close to Nathan, my ears straining for that telltale rhythm. At first, there was nothing, just the crunch of our boots on gravel, the occasional snap of a twig. But as we got closer to where I'd found the tracks, the air shifted. It grew colder. Not a breeze, not a sudden draft, but a heavy, suffocating drop in temperature, like walking into a freezer. Nathan stopped dead ahead of me, flashlight frozen on a spot just beyond the trees. "Look," he whispered. I stepped up beside him. There, half sunken in the mud and weeds, were the rails. Warped and rusted just like before. But tonight, they looked different. Wet. Shiny. As if something heavy had recently passed over them, smoothing the rust away in two clean, parallel lines. Nathan crouched down, reaching out like he wanted to touch the rail. I grabbed his arm without thinking. "Don't," I said, my voice rough. He looked up at me, eyes wide, and for the first time since we were kids, I saw fear there. Real fear. We both heard it then. A whistle. Far off, low and mournful. The kind of sound that drags your guts down into your boots. The woods around us seemed to shudder. The cicadas fell silent. The air grew even colder, our breath misting in front of our faces. We turned, shining our lights down the tracks. There in the distance was a glow. Faint. Flickering, moving closer. Like the beam of an old headlamp, swaying gently side to side. It wasn't fast. It was steady. Relentless. Nathan grabbed my sleeve. We gotta go, man. But my legs didn't want to move. It was like the night itself had sunk into my bones, freezing me in place. The light kept coming. I could hear it now too, the rhythmic pounding of iron wheels over wooden ties. Correct the clack, click clack. I forced myself to back up, dragging Nathan with me. We stumbled blindly through the underbrush, crashing into low branches, tearing through the thorns. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. I just ran, my lungs burning, my heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped animal. Somewhere behind us, the whistle blew again, closer now. So close, I could feel it reverberate in my chest. It wasn't until we burst out onto the service road, gasping and bleeding from a dozen scratches, that I dared glance over my shoulder. The woods stood dark and silent. No light, no sound, no train, nothing but the memory of that cold, patient rhythm beating against my skull. Nathan and I didn't say much on the drive back. The truck bounced along the rutted road, headlights punching thin tunnels through the woods. I stared out the window, half expecting to see that glow weaving between the trees, keeping pace with us. Until you're wrong, but there was nothing. Just endless, suffocating darkness, pressing against the glass. By the time we pulled into my driveway, my hands had stopped shaking, but that cold knot of fear stayed buried deep in my gut. Nathan sat there with the engine idling, fingers drumming a nervous rhythm against the steering wheel. Finally, he said, without looking at me, "I think we saw it." I swallowed hard. "Yeah." He nodded, like he was confirming something to himself. Then, still not meeting my eyes, he added, "My granddad used to talk about it." That caught my attention. I turned to face him fully. "What do you mean?" Nathan shifted uncomfortably, glancing around like he was afraid someone might be listening. He said, "When he was a kid, there was this train that ran after dark. No one knew where it came from or where it went. Folks just stayed away." He paused, rubbing a hand over his face. "Said if you heard it coming, you got off the tracks. No matter what. Didn't matter if you were miles away, you ran." The truck's engine hummed, filling the silence between us. "What happens if you don't?" I asked quietly. Nathan finally looked at me. His expression was hollow. "You don't come back." After he left, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the lights on, listening. Every little creak of the house made my heart jump. I kept expecting to hear that whistle again, rising up out of the night. But the hours crawled by without incident. Around 4 in the morning, I must have dozed off, because I jerked awake to the sharp rap of knuckles on glass. Now I froze, every nerve screaming. There it was again, a soft, deliberate tap, tap, tap against the sliding back door. I sat there, breathing shallowly, the room heavy with silence. Another tap, longer this time, fingernails dragging across the glass. Slowly, I turned my head toward the door. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a faint outline behind them, the shape of a figure. Tall, thin, motionless. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then, almost lazily, the shape leaned forward. The curtains ballooned slightly from the pressure. It was watching. I didn't get up. I didn't speak. I just sat there, heart pounding so hard I could taste copper in my mouth. Eventually, the figure straightened. The curtains fluttered once more, and then it was gone. The only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator kicking on. The next morning, I found tracks outside, not human footprints, but deep, narrow grooves in the soft dirt, running parallel like rails. They led from the woods to the back door, and then away again, like something had rolled up to the house and then moved on. I stood there for a long time, staring down at them, the early morning sun doing little to warm the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I thought about calling Nathan, about telling him what I saw, but I didn't. Because some part of me already knew, whatever this was, it didn't want to be talked about. It wanted to be remembered. It wanted me to listen. The days that followed passed in a strange sort of haze. I went to work. I came home. I tried to pretend everything was normal. But at night, I could feel it. Out there in the woods, waiting. The sound started again, soft at first, barely audible over the hum of the ceiling fan. Click-clack, click-clack, always at the edge of hearing, like a heartbeat just under the skin. Sometimes I thought I saw flashes of light through the trees. Sometimes I dreamed of the tracks, stretching out into an endless black tunnel, the ties rotting away under my feet, always leading somewhere deeper, somewhere worse. One night, about a week after our encounter, Nathan called me. His voice was tight, strained, like he was holding something back. "You hear it?" he asked, no greeting. I didn't have to ask what he meant. "Yeah," I said. A long silence, then, "It's getting closer." I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the window, staring out at the black smear of woods. "Yeah," I whispered. There was a metallic screech in the background, like metal dragging over metal. Nathan swore under his breath. I think it's looking for something," he said. The line crackled. "Or someone." Nathan didn't show up to work the next day. At first, I figured he just needed a break, after everything we'd seen. I couldn't blame him. But when he didn't answer his phone that evening, or the next morning, I knew something was wrong. The sheriff said he'd probably just gone camping, like he sometimes did when things got too heavy. But I knew better. I knew where he'd gone, and I knew I'd have to go after him. I waited until dusk, against every screaming instinct in my body. I packed a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a cheap old compass. Not that it would do me much good out there. The woods felt different this time, heavier, like the trees were leaning in closer, their bare branches knitting together overhead, trapping the last scraps of daylight. I found the start of the old rail line again without too much trouble. The tracks were clearer now, like they'd been uncovered. Metal rails, rusted almost black, stretched in two unbroken lines deeper into the trees. The ground between them was packed smooth, despite the thick carpet of leaves everywhere else, as if something had passed over them recently. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped onto the line. The air immediately felt colder. I shivered and pulled my jacket tighter, listening to the crunch of my boots against the gravel. Above me, the trees groaned softly in the wind, or maybe it was something else. A low, almost mechanical sound, rising and falling. Chug, chug, chug. The deeper I went, the worse it got. I started seeing things, faint glimmers of movement between the trees. Flashes of old, torn-up railway signs, broken fences, crumbling platforms that looked decades abandoned, half swallowed by moss and vines. Once, I caught sight of a rusted ticket booth, standing crooked under a leaning oak, its windows shattered. The tracks never deviated, never turned, just pointed straight into the growing darkness. After what felt like hours, I spotted something ahead, a faint, pulsing glow. White and sickly, like a gas lantern left to burn too long. I switched off my flashlight instinctively, heart hammering. Slowly, carefully, I crept closer. It was a station, or what was left of one, just a long, crumbling platform flanked by two rows of leaning streetlights. The light came from the platform's far end, where a single, battered rail car stood. It looked impossibly old. Riveted metal sides, faded green paint, windows clouded with grime. And standing next to it, barely illuminated by that cold glow, was Nathan. He wasn't moving, just standing there facing the open door of the rail car. I called out his name, but no sound left my mouth. It was like the very air had been sucked out of the clearing. I forced myself forward, boots scraping against the gravel. "Nathan?" I tried again, my voice finally breaking through the suffocating silence. He didn't turn, didn't even flinch. The railcar's door yawned open wider, like it was breathing, and Nathan stepped inside. I ran harder than I ever have in my life, but when I reached the platform, the car was gone. No sound, no tracks, just empty rails stretching into the blackness. Nathan was gone too, gone like he'd never been there at all. I don't remember much about getting home. Somehow I stumbled back through the woods, tripping and falling and tearing myself bloody on the undergrowth. I locked every door, pulled every curtain, and sat in the center of the living room, shivering. All night, I could hear it, the faint, distant sound of a whistle, calling, getting closer, chug, chug, chug. It's been 3 nights since then. I haven't slept, haven't eaten. Every so often I see lights weaving through the trees outside. Hear the rumble of something massive just beyond sight, waiting. Tonight, though, tonight feels different. Heavier. Closer. I just heard the soft clatter of something pulling up outside the house. 2 long, narrow grooves have appeared in the gravel driveway, leading right up to the porch. Something is knocking at the door now. Slow, steady knocks, just like the ones against the glass that night. I think it wants me to come outside. I think it's my turn. The knocking stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse, thick and buzzing, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stayed frozen on the living room floor, every instinct telling me, don't move, don't look, don't breathe. But slowly, against my will, my head turned toward the front window, and I saw it, standing in the yard. Nathan, or something wearing his shape. He looked wrong. His head tilted too far to one side, like the bones in his neck were too soft. His clothes hung from him, soaked and tattered like he'd climbed out of a river. And his eyes, they were gone. Just dark, hollow sockets, glinting faintly in the porch light. But even without eyes, I knew he was looking at me. Somehow I felt it, a cold pressure against my skin, like invisible hands pressing down. I flinched back instinctively, knocking over the coffee table. The crash echoed through the house, and that seemed to wake him up. Door open. He lurched forward, slow, jerky movements, one dragging step at a time, closer to the front door. I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering so hard I could barely see. He was reaching for the doorknob now, turning it. I ran. Not to the back door. I wasn't thinking clearly enough for that. I bolted down the hallway to the basement steps, throwing myself down them in 2 long strides. Behind me, the front door creaked open. Soft, slow hinges, groaning under the weight of something heavy. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The basement was freezing. The concrete floor bit at my bare feet as I stumbled across it. I ducked behind the old boiler in the corner, pressing myself into the deepest shadow I could find. From upstairs, I heard the first footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. Thud. Thud. The floorboards above me creaked and moaned. Dust drifted down from the ceiling in slow, lazy spirals. He was moving through the house, room by room, looking for me. I pressed my hand over my mouth, forcing myself to breathe through my nose. Stay quiet. Stay hidden. The air smelled like rust and damp concrete, thick and suffocating. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying not to imagine those empty sockets scanning the darkness, sniffing the air like some broken animal. The footsteps grew louder, closer, They were at the top of the basement steps now. A long, dragging pause. And then the first stair creaked under his weight. I opened my eyes just enough to see movement in the blackness. A shadow, darker than the rest of the room, unfolding itself at the bottom of the stairs. He was here, and he was bringing something with him, something clutched in his ruined, dripping hands. A lantern, old and battered, just like the ones I'd seen lining the abandoned platform. Its light wasn't warm, wasn't comforting. It was a cold, sickly green, casting long, distorted shadows across the concrete walls. The shadows moved wrong, twitching, writhing, even when he stood still. As he moved deeper into the basement, the shadows stretched toward me. Fingers clawing across the walls and floor, reaching, searching. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was crouched behind the boiler, frozen. The next, I was sprinting across the basement toward the old storm cellar door. It hadn't been used in years, probably rusted shut, but I didn't have a choice. Behind me, the shadow hands brushed my back, cold as river water. I slammed into the cellar doors, throwing my shoulder against them repeatedly. Finally, with a shriek of rusted hinges, they burst open. I tumbled out into the night air, gasping, scrambling up onto the grass. The house behind me pulsed with that sickly light, leaking from every window, and I heard it again, faint at first, but rising, growing, chug, chug, chug. The rumble of something impossibly large just beyond the trees, the shriek of a train whistle slicing through the night. I didn't look back. I just ran, through the woods, branches slashing at my face and arms, through the thorns and brambles, through the cold, damp mist rising from the earth. I don't know how long I ran. Minutes, hours. It didn't matter. All I knew was that if I stopped, it would catch me. And if it caught me, I wouldn't come back the same. I couldn't stop running. I knew it was pointless. I knew it deep in my bones. But I ran anyway. Through the trees, through the mist. The woods seemed endless, stretching on and on, no end in sight. The train whistle was closer now. Chug, chug, chug. I could hear it in the ground beneath me, vibrating through my feet. I could feel it in my chest, like something enormous was coming, something powerful enough to swallow the whole forest whole. I didn't dare look behind me. I couldn't. Something told me if I looked back, I wouldn't be able to stop, and then I would be lost. My legs were on fire. Every breath was a struggle. I wanted to collapse, to scream, but I couldn't. The sound of the train grew louder. It was so close now, I could hear the rattle of its wheels on old iron, feel the tremors of its movement in my teeth. And then, through the fog ahead of me, I saw it. A figure stands in the clearing. At first I thought it was Nathan, but then I saw the eyes, or what should have been eyes, dark, empty holes just like his. The figure didn't move, but somehow I knew it was watching me. It was waiting. I couldn't stop myself. I was too tired, too desperate, so I ran toward it. I shouldn't have, but I did. As I got closer, I saw that it wasn't Nathan. It was something else. A figure wrapped in tattered old rags, stained black with dirt and blood. It wasn't human, not completely. I could see the outlines of limbs, but they bent wrong, twisting in ways they shouldn't. The ragged figure stood just beyond the trees, and the train was coming. And then it smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was a gaping, torn maw, filled with jagged teeth, some too large for its skull, others too small, mismatched, like they'd been stuffed in there in a hurry. Its mouth stretched wide, and I heard it whisper my name. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No, no, no. And then I saw the train. It was coming straight for me, faster than anything should have been. I could feel the heat, the rumble of its massive presence pushing against the air. but it wasn't made of metal. It was something else. A thing. A creature. An endless black form, devouring everything in its path. It was long and twisted, like the tracks themselves had been swallowed up and reshaped into some monstrous version of a train. And there was a face at the front. A twisted, gnarled face of wood and bark, pulsing with dark red light. It was like something was alive inside of it, screaming, gnashing at the edges of the world, clawing for freedom. And in the middle of it, at the very heart, I saw Nathan. His face was pale, his eyes empty like the others. But he wasn't himself anymore. Not truly. He was part of it now, a piece of the thing. I tried to run again, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I was frozen, caught in its gaze. And I knew it was too late. It was always too late. The train's whistle screamed again, deafening this time, and I felt the ground tremble beneath me, a wave of force pushing me to the earth. It wasn't just the train now. It was everything. Everything I had ever seen, every place I had ever been, was closing in on me. The trees, the tracks, the shadows. They were all alive, breathing, watching, and it was pulling me in. I couldn't move. I couldn't escape. The last thing I saw was Nathan's face, twisted and broken, merging with the darkness as the creature loomed ever closer. But then, something shifted. A presence, faint at first, like a whisper in the storm. A hand, cold, firm, and yet strangely familiar. It wrapped around my wrist with a suddenness that jolted me from my paralysis. I didn't have time to process it, but I recognized the grip. It was the sheriff. Sheriff Thompson, the man who had warned me to stay off the tracks. His voice was low, hoarse, as he pulled me away from the darkness. "Come on," he muttered, dragging me with surprising strength. I didn't have the energy to resist. My body screamed in protest, but his hand held fast, pulling me through the fog, through the trees, away from whatever nightmare had come alive. The force that had been pressing in on me began to recede, the train's thunderous approach fading with each step. "Don't look back," Sheriff Thompson growled. I didn't ask questions. I didn't have the strength to. I just let him drag me farther until the sound of the train disappeared completely. Then, everything stopped. The fog lifted. The trees were still. The shadows no longer clawed at the edges of my vision. I took a breath, the air suddenly cold and clean, and opened my eyes to find myself in a dimly lit room. It wasn't the woods, it wasn't the train, its hospital bed. My body ached as if I'd been hit by a freight train. I blinked slowly, trying to make sense of where I was. The steady beeping of machines filled the air, the sterile smell of antiseptic lingering around me. I looked around, but there was no sign of Sheriff Thompson. No sign of the woods, no sign of Nathan. I was alone. A nurse walked by, her face expressionless, not noticing me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Something wasn't right. Something felt wrong. I strained my ears to listen, hoping for some answer, some sign of what had really happened. And then, faint but unmistakable, I heard it. The slow, rhythmic chugging of the train. Chug, chug, chug. It was distant, but unmistakable, and it was coming closer. I closed my eyes, gripping the hospital sheets, hoping it was just a sound in my head. But no. The train was real. It was coming back. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the faintest sound. The slow, rhythmic chugging of the train coming back.